Dr. José
António
Pinto Ribeiro.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us today.
Yes.
Your lecture was on economic bridges, aims, incentives, and impacts. So, taken from your lecture, do you mind if we can ask you several questions?
Yes, please do.
Okay. The first question is, what role do you think cultural diplomacy has in overcoming challenges that arise from multicultural or multilateral trade negotiations?
I think that cultural diplomacy has a very important role. It is important that we do not restrict cultural diplomacy to the diplomacy made by the diplomats of the states or by the international organizations. We must generalize cultural diplomacy. There were in the 17th, 18th, and even 19th century, but mostly in the 17th, 18th, and beginning of the 19th century, many people who traveled around and traveled culturally around, like Lord Byron, like whoever they like Goethe.
Rudyard Kipling.
Yes, they traveled culturally. But this cultural travel was mostly an appropriation of the cultures and of the experiences brought home and written home. It was mostly one-sided. It was European people who went to see and know those things. But anyhow, it was a way of making cultural diplomacy. It was a one-sided cultural diplomacy, but it was cultural diplomacy. At the same time, we have been deprived, we have been expropriated of this capacity by mass tourism. It is important to go and see, but the aspect of the intervention in state affairs, in economic affairs, in political and diplomatic affairs is much less relevant. Tourists go and tourists come, but there is no consequence of their going and coming in diplomatic relations, in economic, cultural, and diplomatic relations. Yes, our mind changes. That's important. There was a survey in the United States asking Americans many Americans, if they have traveled abroad, and they all said no. And they asked a Kansas farmer if he had been abroad, and he said no. And then after reflection, he said, "I'm sorry, does New York count?" See, going abroad is knowing something different. And New York is culturally different from Kansas, of course it is, and so it was going abroad. I think that it is important that we start understanding that our individual intervention is relevant for this economic and cultural diplomacy. We must create nets through the social nets in internet. Those social nets are very important. Those social platforms are very important so that we link. We can virally change things nowadays through public opinion. It is very uncontrolled, but because it is uncontrolled, there is an opportunity. There is an opportunity to intervene and to enlarge the notion of diplomatic intervention, either in economics or in culture or in politics. And I believe there is a big role in this intervention, in changing things and in moving the world in a better and different way. But mostly what I think is that cultural diplomacy is, if we understand it well, is a way to think about problems differently. Is a way to think, to find solutions to complex problems in a way that we enlarge the number of people that are made happy by those solutions, that we enlarge the things that make us more human, that makes more understanding of the other, that makes that we can solve the problems in peace and without damages and without making other people suffer, and that we can create wealth instead of destroying wealth, that we can create more opportunities for individual freedom than restrict those opportunities. what is happening in Greece now and has been happening in the last 2 years, whatever and whoever the fault, is probably in many ways, or has been in many ways, mismanaged. Maybe we could have, if we had thought it properly, if we had been able to intervene more carefully on this by cultural diplomacy, if we could have explained to people, people who come to intervene economically and politically, and many times do not know anything about Greece and about the Greece situation, the Greek history, and the way Greek was set up, the modern Greece was set. Those people, maybe with the input by Greeks, not necessarily, at least not only on the street shouting and demonstrating, but by other intervention, by other diplomatic intervention, I think could change a lot of things, economically, politically, and culturally.
Do you think there's a difference between personal intervention and the intervention by states when it comes to cultural diplomacy?
There is a difference.
Yeah, well, how do the two conflict?
No, there is a difference because the difference is the same difference that you have in democratic states. There is nobody has yet found a system in which it is not the minority that rules and the majority that obeys. And so obviously there are conflicts, obviously there are dysfunctions in this representation, and obviously what this means is if it is a minority that is ruling, however determined, however chosen, and it is not irrelevant how it is chosen. It is very relevant if it is democratically chosen or not. Everything is very relevant. But at the end of the day, it is still a problem of a minority and the majority. And this minority, at least for a period, every 4 years or whatever, expropriates the power of the majority. And obviously, if the majority wants to intervene after 3 days, 3 months, they say, but it have just been elections. You must wait for 4 years to vote now. Of course, there are those problems, but those problems are the problems of the state of affairs we have in the world, and we have not yet found a new way and a different way. But also, in that sense, the intervention of individuals in thinking, in creating new solutions, in proposing new ways to live together, to organize the states, to have, for instance, it would be very important for us to understand whether separation of powers is really so important as we say it is, but we only pay lip service to that. But in reality, we don't have separation of powers. We have the parties controlling everything underneath, and they have the executive and the parliament and the judges, and so maybe we should go a little bit deeper into separation of powers. Maybe we should understand that separation of power has to do with the court system. Maybe we should have the jury system in the courts, and we don't have. There are many things that we could change by cultural diplomacy, and even by comparative law, knowing how the others solve the problems. If you have to discover the wheel, and somebody has already discovered that in the next country, maybe you could look.
I think it was Winston Churchill who said that democracy is a very bad system, but it's the best one we have.
No, yes, he said it the other way around. It's the worst system, excluding all the others.
Yes. Second question. In your opinion, what role does cultural diplomacy have when it comes to international trade organizations, such as the World Bank, WTO, OECD, and the others? Should they include cultural diplomacy projects in their agenda, and why or why not? Yes,
I think they should. They should introduce culture. I think the Washington Consensus that existed for the World Bank and for the multilateral organizations like the IMF in their interventions, it is very important that people. It is very hard to do this because I understand that they can only have an acceptable program if this program is acceptable to all the countries.
Yes.
This means that you have a minimal program. But they should be aware that in many situations and opportunities, they should try to enlarge this and to go to a much further program when they make those interventions in countries that are in very economic, very complicated situations. And they should see if they can. Of course, there are different political forces and all those problems exist in whatever country you intervene. But I think they should look at the cultural aspects, the political aspects, the organization of the state, but they should mostly care about the functioning, the effective functioning of a, I would say, a democratic society. Yes, you can tell me, but why should it be democratic? Why should it not be, I don't know if it is democratic, I don't think it is, at least according to Western notions. Why should it not be like some countries that function well and have a system that we don't consider very democratic?
Like Singapore.
Like China, like Singapore, like whatever. But is it worse? Or is it necessary? Is it as democratic as it is possible nowadays? We thought that Tiananmen was something awful, yes. But was it possible to do it differently, to deal with that? Yes, maybe it was possible to deal with that differently. I think it was possible to deal with that differently. But would it be much more democratic? I would say at least less violent. But more democratic, I don't know. So, yes, what we should look at is our target of those organizations should be to do more in the sense less of creating an effective market. That's where they look at. They want economic diplomacy to create a market system that works, that functions.
Yes.
And they should be aware that it should be a political system that functions. And a political system that functions under certain conditions. Human rights, yes, there should be. In my opinion, there should be separation of powers. In my opinion, there should be jury systems in courts, in criminal courts. Separation of powers, elected parliament. I think that this would be the minimum they should look at and look for. For instance, we had the intervention of the world market, the World Bank and the IMF in Eastern Europe. No country has separation of powers with the courts. No court system is independent. How come? They were there for 20 years. The wall and the Soviet Union collapsed in 1990. It's 22 years ago. 21 years ago at least. We were there for 20 years.
My idea is that there's no civil society that's running, and
no, I'm sorry. I was not speaking about the civil society.
Okay.
I was speaking about those who come. We had the civil society, as you said, had been expropriated of the power, so no civil society exists. People are trying only to survive.
Exactly.
Yes, but the program was made by those who ruled at the time, or those who told those who ruled what program they should do. And why did they tell them a program that did not include independence of the courts? Why did they? And the independence of the courts is not telling the people in the executive, don't mess with the judges. No, it's setting up a system in which they cannot mess with the judges because it is irrelevant to mess with the judges because the judges do not decide, it's the jury. And you cannot mess with all the population because you don't know who is who is going to be the jury tomorrow. So you cannot mess with him today. You cannot challenge him. You cannot not control him because every day there are more than 500,000 jury decisions a year in California. More than 500,000, and they represent only a small fraction of sentencing. The others are by plea bargain. Okay, very small fraction, 4%, and it works very well.
Okay. Next question. What roles and responsibilities does the private sector have when it comes to cultural diplomacy? Should they include cultural diplomacy projects in their CSR departments, and why not? So,
CSR?
A cultural social corporate social responsibility.
Yes. Yes, they should. They should include. They should include because cultural diplomacy and cultural projects are the ones that free people the most. Those are the programs that enable, that capacitate people as much, that they allow them to reappropriate their own destiny. And so social responsibility, corporate social responsibility should induce corporations to and organizations to create systems by which people are re-empowered of their own destiny, by which they get free and they get more humane and they get more information, more knowledge, and they can decide about their own lives better. And this is what cultural diplomacy is about.
Okay. Do you think that corporations with corporate social responsibility should have different programs depending on what country they are? For example, in Europe as opposed to Africa?
Of course, they should have different programs adapted to the circumstances and the situation, but they should have all of the same goals.
Okay, fair enough. That's good. Thank you for that answer. Following the Occupy Wall Street and other social movements, what is the potential that cultural diplomacy has to challenge this, and also for the future of global economics?
I'm sorry, I don't know much about Occupy Wall Street. I have not followed that movement enough so that I could tell you about that anything special.
But what about resistance movements in general against the global economy? For example, like in the Zapatistas, for example,
yes,
rose up against the NAFTA agreement. So I guess what would be your opinion on that? Can cultural diplomacy play a role?
Cultural diplomacy can always play a role in trying to understand the reasoning of one side and one party, and trying to explain to the other party the reasoning of this party. It's always possible to explain. Cultural diplomacy as always should always be and have the goal of allowing people to solve their problems by understanding and by using their voting power to make things happen this or that way. So I think that cultural diplomacy should always have the goal of solving problems for which maybe there are different approaches and different solutions by democratic, negotiable instruments, and not by force. Law, one of the main cultural objectives, one of the main objectives and goals of cultural diplomacy should be to create a rule of law.
Okay.
If you create rule of law, then you will create a system in which conflicts are resolved, are regulated and resolved in a way that the power of one group or one person over the other group or the other person is not relevant for the solving of the problem.
Yes, but the rule of law also has to be legitimate in order for it to follow. So,
of course, this is rule of law.
Yes.
There is no rule. You speak French?
No, unfortunately, no. I can try.
Yes. La loi du plus fort n'est pas la meilleure. The law of the stronger is not the French say is the better. The law of the stronger is always the better law. This is not law. This is force. The rule or the law of the stronger is a contradiction in its terms. If it is of the stronger, it is not law. If it is of the stronger, we are not in rights and civil rights, we are in somewhere else. This means that, of course, rule of law means that it is a way by which problems are solved independently of the force of one party, but of the rights, of the reasonability of the attitude of this party in relation to the other.
Okay, thank you. How do you see the current economic situation of your country? In the media, we can read about serious problems on the financial side. What economic measures are you taking to get out of the recession? I'm speaking.
Oh, they are taking all the measures that they have agreed with the Troika, the IMF, the European Central Bank, and the European Commission. And they will do that program, and they will take all the necessary pills, and they believe that they will get cured by that. If they get cured or not by that, I would say, I hope it will be plain and clear that the responsibility will not be on the Portuguese side. If we don't get cured, it is because the medicine was the wrong one. In this case, the medicine was an imposed medicine. We were intervened. Yes, we made ourselves ill. I grant you that. I accept that. But the medicine was not chosen by us.
Okay. I can see something hidden in there. Maybe.
No, there's nothing hidden in there. It's just that it's as with the creditors.
Yes.
If at a certain moment you don't have enough money to pay the creditors and you borrowed money more than you had, they will take your property. That's what happens in Western civilized countries.
I hope they don't take Portugal away.
They won't. Portugal is not takeable away.
Given your experience in the European Bank Federation, what is the biggest threat to the European banking system, and how far will the implementation of the Basel Agreement go in solving these problems?
I will not express a position on that. I would not like to compromise the position of the European Banking Federation.
Okay, could you express what the position is of the European Banking Federation?
No, I would not.
Okay, fair enough.
I would not.
So,
but there is a challenge for the banking system. Not involving the European Banking Federation, I would say that the challenge for the banking system is how to regulate the use of capital, which is what they have or should not have destroyed. How to regulate the use of capital in a way that profit is derived from the creation of social wealth and not by the destruction of social wealth. So I get richer because I create social wealth and I get a part of the social wealth I create. I appropriate a part of that, and not because I destroy social wealth and thereby I acquire a part of property that did not belong to me.
So someone like Adam Smith in his book on Sentiments of Morals.
No, it has nothing to do with that. I will tell you off the record, so not now. It corresponds to another book, but it's not that one, and it's not Adam Smith.
Okay.
It means that the capitalist system will work well as long as people get richer because they create wealth, social wealth.
Yes.
And it will dysfunction when you get richer because you destroy social wealth.
Thank you. And our final question. In your previous capacity as Minister of Culture, did you see any evidence that art has a role to play in the country's economy?
Yes.
So.
Yes, there is clear evidence in that. There is clear evidence in the sense that people who come and visit you and want to contact with a rich identity, want to see who you are, want to know you. People don't come, or many people don't come anymore just for the sun and for the beaches and the sea. They come and they want to sometimes in a postmodern way, they want to have an experience. They want to have been there, done that, and have this experience, and it's done. But many come and they really want to understand how it is possible to solve the problems of the world differently. How do people get along with their lives? How do people divorce? How do people not divorce? How they have kids? How they... and there are many really different ways. Maybe in Europe we are very, very similar, but for instance, the way the teaching is organized in China, in which typically the oldest people take care of the youngest ones and teach them, is a very different way from the one we have now. And there are many things that we can learn by making cultural tourism. And so the richness of the arts. Art is just a way of solving life problems. And so if it is a new way, a different way, a richer way, everybody will be interested in understanding that.